Infrastructure is a foundation everything else depends on, yet it remains one of the least visible and least understood parts of enterprise security. As organizations grapple with hybrid environments, ransomware, and more recently, AI-driven attacks, the real question isn't just what tools we deploy, but whether we actually understand and secure the infrastructure underneath. In this latest episode of CISO Point of View, we're focusing on what infrastructure security really looks like in the real world, beyond frameworks and beyond hype. I'm really excited to be joined today by Steve Gillham, the Infrastructure Security Manager at TSB Bank, and a seasoned cybersecurity leader with more than 2 decades of experience securing large-scale financial services environments, building his career at the intersection of IT infrastructure, network security, vulnerability management, and enterprise operations. And that includes a range of roles at Capital One, Metro Bank, Santander, GE Capital, and Credit Agricole. Steve, it's great to have you with us.
Great, thanks.
Steve, let's dive straight in. You've spent much of your career at that intersection I mentioned before of infrastructure and security. How has an infrastructure first background shaped the way you think about cyber risk?
Well, being in IT before I started cybersecurity for 25 years, I've built up a ground knowledge of like how different systems work, whether it's Windows, Linux, hypervisors, cloud, containers, all those type of environments. So I understand how they're built, like from ground upwards. So using that knowledge gave me a good grounding to make me understand cybersecurity, which I've been doing for the last 20 years. So having that grounding has really helped me, not just from a technology side, but also appreciation for when we ask them to put some controls in, the actual IT teams or the business teams, what they need to do to actually get those controls in place. So it's not just I understand how to do it, I need to understand how the other teams will go about it and the challenges they face just getting the work done.
Yeah. And when you look today across enterprise environments, where do you think infrastructure security is still being misunderstood or perhaps underestimated by leadership?
I think it is misunderstanding. Well, I don't know whether it's misunderstanding or they just trying to save money. The business wants to make money and they don't really want to spend money on security, so they will do the bare minimum. And it's like the business will say, right, we need to harden our systems. So security will say, right, well, this is the framework for hardening, say, Windows. You need to, we do a review of those controls. We find these gaps, and then the business either has to work and get close those gaps off, but some of the time it means that they have to do extra work. So a lot of the time they say, well, we can't do that, so security will have to accept the risk. But it's not really, this is the misunderstanding. It's not security having to accept that risk. It's the business, because like they want it secure, not, we're just there to implement those controls. So if they're saying, no, we can't do it, well, then that's their issue they need to accept. So they need to raise the risk acceptance, which often happens where they just say, well, no, it's a security risk, which we need to accept. And I think that's totally wrong. So you have to try and educate them into the way and say, no, look, this is a business risk. You need to sign it off. Or the other one is where they have an idea where they say, right, all our critical vulnerabilities patch within 7 days, or all our highs within 14 days. But their actual business change management process doesn't match up to that. So there's no way you're going to ever meet that requirement. So then it looks like the vulnerability management team are not doing their job because they can't meet the standards that the business has set. But it's really that business process which needs to change or be accepted, that you need to build that into what you're asking. So those type of things, really.
It's a really valid point. And pivoting the conversation from security being that an IT expenditure Right? Actually, what we need to be doing is talking about a strategic initiative, broad business strategic initiative. I want to move on and talk about infrastructure as the security foundation, whether it's cloud and hybrid and on-prem. It seems that infrastructure has never been more fragmented. What does good infrastructure security hygiene actually mean in the reality?
Well, it's just basic IT, really. It's making sure that you can rebuild systems, consistently. So it doesn't really matter whether it's cloud, on-prem, hybrid. It doesn't matter to me what they are. But if you can build them consistency, then you can rebuild them really quickly. So that's where that resilience comes in. When I was at Capital One, they was building everything as instructors code. So you could build like 100,000 servers a day purely by just running the code, and it would just build the environment for you. And you could do that every few days, like on your 400,000 devices. You can, like, after 4 days, you've got a completely new environment. So that cuts down the dwell time of an attacker who gets onto your system, because you've just rebuilt it within a day or two. So that's a really good way of working. But a lot of companies fail where they just don't keep their CMDB up to date. So you've got this not understanding of like where that technology is, who's the owner of that device is, and that is just a business process which is failing. It's not a security thing. This is pure, the business failing at that level. If they can get that right, that would make it a lot stronger and more resilient to any problems. Because if you get some machine played up, it might not be malicious or anything. You need to know what that machine is doing. Can it be shut down? Could it be rebooted? Who do you contact? Where is it located? You need all that information. And if that's not in the CMDB, operations can't, work with that.
Yeah, very, very valid point. One of the things we've seen in the last couple of years, 2.5 years, is a major threat, which is increase in breaches of storage and backup infrastructure. You think about United Health a couple of years ago, the attack on Johnson Controls, Norton Healthcare, Allen and Overy. We're starting to see a lot more headlines with fairly large organizations suffering a breach of their storage and backup infrastructure. What are the biggest blind spots you see when it comes to the security of storage and backup systems?
Really, storage and backup is not my area. It's more the IT side. But from the security side, it's more, have you got that completely isolated? So all the control planes are isolated off, and you have to have MFA to get onto those control planes. So you can if you're backing up data, the data can be backed up one way. There's no way of scrambling that data on the back end, because you've got the control plane completely separated from the data plane. So that type of thing. And also the hypervisor level as well. You need to do that, because if an attacker gets in and onto a hypervisor, they can just take out your servers without having any permissions on the actual servers, but they're doing it at the hypervisor level. So you need those control planes, or on the management interfaces, to be really locked down and have MFA access on those, so it's not easy to get onto those devices.
Let's talk about operating in the real world. So security teams rarely get everything they ask for. So how would you recommend CISOs balance ideal security architectures with real world budget and skills and operational constraints?
Well, most companies can't afford the best in breed solutions. You really want to stop going out and buying tools which just do 10% of the work. Sometimes you might have to say, well, we know there's gaps and this solution doesn't fit, but it's a good all-rounder. It might do 80% of the work, and we'll just have to accept there's gaps within that which we can't do. Because it's not just about buying the software. You need the resource to actually manage it. Because you often go into a business and they've got software which has not been fully rolled out. There's not many people who understand it well enough to manage it. So it only gets partially rolled out. And that is a real problem, because if you haven't got the staff to actually manage it, you have one person managing multiple different tools. They have to keep context switching, and that's really puts stress on that individual, because there's no way that that person, say if a vulnerability management person, they're not going to understand like WAF consoles and things like that, because it's not their area. You might have someone who's like has a general knowledge like I do of these things, but I don't know it fully in depth, and having to pick up tools which you're not fully trained in, but the company's bought it and someone's got to manage it, can cause operational risks, really. So really try and stick to a small selection of tools and know those tools really well, and really get the most out of what you're paying for.
I want to talk about the partnership with IT and security because you touched upon it a couple of times. So, in industries like financial services sector, how does the IT and the security team collaborate effectively without slowing the business down?
I think being in a regulated industry, this which why I like financial side, is because you've got those regulations you have to meet. So the various teams know, whether it's IT or the business, knows that they have to meet these regulations to be, for us, it's a bank. So we have to meet those regulations. So that really helps like drive security controls for us. So for me, that's why I prefer working in financial institutes, because otherwise, if you go to another industry, it might not be as security might not be taken as seriously, because there's no regulations around it. So as long as the senior leadership knows that they are signing off the risks, if they can't meet those controls, then it's at the right level. You don't want some low-level person signing off that risk. It needs to be a senior leader who signs off risks if they can't meet a certain control. Because at the end of the day, they're the ones who are going to be up in front of people.
Let's talk a bit about cyber resiliency and recovery. So I mentioned before, ransomware is increasingly targeting some traditional on-prem infrastructure layers like storage and backup systems, as well as endpoints. How should security teams think differently about protecting these mission-critical layers?
It goes into my area, which is like the micro-segmentation and zero trust networking, in that if you can ring fence certain business services, then only those authorized traffic and users can access those machines. So that really limits the blast radius. So if one system gets compromised, it's not going to affect another one, because there's just no way of them getting onto that system, because it's locked down to only approved channels. So that's really good way, but it is hard to do that. It's not just buy a solution. It will learn from like the normal patterns of life, and then you just press block. You need to understand there's a lot of business process behind that. So if anyone makes a change, it needs to go through all the approvals. It needs to be added to the ring fence policies before it even goes live. Otherwise, it just won't work. There's a lot of the business process needs to be adapted. You just can't buy the software, switch a button, and it will do it for you. It just doesn't work, which I think a lot of companies fell down on when they went to zero trust, in that it's not a solution you buy, it's a way of working that you need to work to.
Are there other methodologies or strategies or even questions that security teams should be asking as part of that zero trust strategy to ensure that everything can be recovered and secured?
Not sure on that. So I would probably say, the backup, this goes back to the backup solutions again, where as long as you've got your MFA on your control plane, then it's down to the IT to restore a certain amount of systems at whatever time. And one critical system might have to rely on lots of IT systems. So say if a Windows device, you need to have Entra ID and like deployment servers, which need to be up and running as well as the critical systems. So you need all these different levels or IT infrastructure up before you bring back other critical systems. So as long as the business understands that it's not like one system needs to come up in 4 hours, you need all the other systems which what that is based on to be brought up as well. So it could be 4 hours for a critical business system, but 6 hours for all the other IT systems around that system.
Let's talk a bit about security leadership and skills. Throughout your career, you've mentored many security professionals. And do you believe the next generation of security leaders will still need deep infrastructure experience to be effective leaders?
I think it certainly helps having an infrastructure background, but I don't think you must have it. It's not a must have. If you don't have that infrastructure background, you could easily be sold a solution from a seller, because these people do really nice presentations. They make it look so easy. And without that infrastructure background, you could easily just be missold tool because you just don't know the questions to ask. It's very easy to say something, but it's a lot harder to do it in the actual environment. And a lot of companies do get caught out that way. They're sold a solution and it just won't work in their environment because of other technical reasons.
And when we look ahead, we're starting to see AI being used by both the threat actors and also embraced by security teams. How should security teams think about protecting their mission critical IT infrastructure in a world of AI assisted attacks?
Wild time at the moment. I mean, AI is it's just going so fast that it's really hard to keep up with, like what guardrails you need in for whatever process. I mean, it was when they first started doing AI. Well, we've used AI for a long 10, 15 years. It's only they're talking more about LLMs, which is like the new stuff, which is the last few years that everyone's suddenly jumping up and down on. And I think a lot of businesses have seen this, and it's easy to understand. And so they think, right, we'll just get AI in, but we don't know what we're going to do with it, but we just need it in. It's like the fear of missing out sort of effect. And that is going to cause a lot of security gaps and vulnerabilities and risk. But we just have to catch up as we go along and learn from mistakes. Because it was only a few years ago that everyone was going into AI agents. Then it was, no, we're going to use MCPs, and now that's all being thrown out the window, and we're going to abandon that, and we'll just go with AI agents again. So it's like, well, if you're halfway through rolling out your solution, now you're changing it back and moving away from MCPs, where you've just suddenly put all your controls in. Now you're going to have to redesign it again. So it's this constant changing all the time, which companies will get breached over this. It's just no way around it. But that's where we are, and we're going to find out as we go along. So I don't mind whether if we go with AI. I think it's important that we should use it, but the business has to accept the risk that we're not going to be able to protect it, and not straight away, and we're going to find gaps, and we're going to have to deal with it as we go along. The idea that some businesses will buy it just to replace people is a misunderstanding of like how that works, because if you get one particular job, it's made up of lots of different tasks. Now, AI can certainly replace some of those tasks, but it can't replace that whole job role. And if it does, then you're going to have gaps within that, because that one person was doing other stuff which the AI is not dealing with, and someone else has got to pick that up. And then you get back to that context switching, where people don't really understand another role, someone else's role, but they've been asked to take up that job task because that person's been made redundant.
So you see AI
then,
as complementary to people.
Yeah, certainly. And also there's the fact that if you just get rid of your juniors staff and replace them with AI, at some point your senior staff are going to move on or retire. So you need every business is going to need some low level people coming in to learn the ropes. And if you've just killed off that supply chain of like new people coming in, 5-10 years time, you're going to have to pay through the nose to get qualified people back in the industry. And then that's so it's not really that productive doing that, where it's better to bring in low level people at a lower salary and build their knowledge up, even if they leave in a couple of years, the whole industry will gain from that.
Very good point. And finally, Steve, if you could give one piece of advice to a CISO who is reassessing their infrastructure security posture or their strategy today, what would it be?
There's a quote by Bruce Nyer, and he said that if you think technology can solve your security problems, then you don't understand the problem and you don't understand the technology. And that is a real key thing, where don't just go out and buy software to fix it, because it just won't do that. There's a lot of like processing behind that, like human processing and business processes, which need to be in place before you can use that technology.
Fantastic. Thank you, Steve. And in one final sentence, give me a soundbite. What does secure infrastructure really mean this year and in the foreseeable future?
Focus on the basics, really. Just, don't go out and buy solutions. Sort out your basics first. And they're the main 4 or 5 key things that you should be doing within your environment.
Fantastic. Steve, thank you for joining me on today's CISO Point of View.
Brilliant. Thank you.